combine, obviously, the deer and the turkeys together.
Now, is that broom, the tops? Yep. Turkeys love that stuff. It's exceptional nesting.
A bunch of trees. We got orchards everywhere. And I would probably say the last 11 or 12 years I've planted as much as 5, I think we're up to 5 different species of different oaks. And fruit trees, we probably planted 2,500 to 3,000.
That's a lot of trees.
A lot of trees.
I love improving soft mast. It's, you know, a lot of times they're in very huntable locations.
Yeah.
And deer like them. Like you pointed out, that big deer always, he hit the candy first and go to those pears. And
this feeder down here is a prototype made locally, but the concept's there. 2 people can put it together. Let me show this feeder. Tyler, show them off when you mow that feeder over here.
That's regular braid. They clip right there.
Blake, this is one of the prototypes. You can see how much it covers, but the roof system's going to be out 6 inches on either side. Everything goes in the sleeve, so it all fits inside. So you just put that sleeve in all 4 corners, just bolt it in. And the same thing with the roof system. Instead of having a sharp edge, you're like cutting your head when you go in, but powder coated, should last a long time, but it looks good with Monster Meal in it.
it looks good anyway. We talked about being able to see through a feeder and how important that is to deer.
Yeah.
And from an acceptance standpoint. Later on, we'll talk about different types of feeders too, I'm sure, because as you get smaller in land management, sometimes you have to change the feeder for the application.
Absolutely.
But I mean, to have a commercial unit that's easy to put together is going to be huge, because if you start to search deer feeders, typically you find either T-post feeders, which they're just not very durable, and or you get into very expensive feeders, and I'm not sure what the retail is here, but being metal, you don't have to deal with wood rot or anything like that, and I'm sure you've got some sort of anchoring.
We do. They come with stakes, big stakes, right. And we put the flat feet on there too. They'll have holes that you can actually put one on each side. Obviously, you just tap it in, but the flat feet keep it from sinking, into the ground too if it's wet or just in a wet spot. The height from the ground floor up to here is 24 inches, and then the roof from I think it's 42 inches from up to here. So you can see you got plenty of space to get up underneath, for any size deer. We're kind of proud of it. It's just simple slide in on 4 sides, slide in right there, and then slide in the roof system at the top, and you're ready to go.
Well, as we were talking about in the truck when we came over here, I first heard about this concept probably 4 years ago.
Probably
I think. And I understand how hard in manufacturing is to bring something from an idea to a manufacturable prototype, and what might look like a relatively simplistic unit. There's so much more that goes into it, and I applaud you for sticking through and finding a functional unit. I can't wait for them to become available, because there's a couple places that we have that they're going to work great.
The neat thing about this is all this fits inside the body here. The legs, the roof system sits down on top. We're experimenting. We got engineers still working on it. It's going to be a true roof system that has a seam down the middle. The main thing for us is just even blowing wind and rain is to have enough coverage out so the feed doesn't get wet, inside. And so right now we're working on 6 inches from out here on all the way around. So I think it's going to work super. And we've done a lot of testing and still got more to do. And we have some engineers kind of fine-tuning this one right here, so we're looking forward to it. Tyler?
Yeah, it looks good.
Looks good.
And we already talked about kind of the convenience factor, putting the food within the food. Is there any tips that you have for orientation? I noticed that this one happens to be where if a deer comes into this feeder, he's going to kind of be broadside to that redneck. Is that intentional or by accident? It might be intentional.
A little of both.
Yeah, there's a reason why it's pretty close right here, but just like you said, we talked about it the last time, just that convenience factor. These deer are used to it right now, going into summer, into fall. So they don't. It's not like we have to change up their pattern a whole lot. They're kind of already on that that pattern they've had for at the beginning and middle part of the year before the fall starts.
A question from us too is we talk about, give me a calendar month starting time, which you recommend. Again, different parts of the country I'm sure are different. When should you start the protein, and talk a little bit about the pellets aspect of it too?
Protein is a 12-month thing, but it changes through the month.
Right.
To me, the most important time to feed protein is really right now. You want your deer conditioned to the protein, and here's why. We're at that point, end of February, in most latitudes, you've got equal daylight and dark, and that triggers a mechanism within the deer to start their spring and fall growth. You've got gestation of fawns, antler growth really starts in another month. Normally in the wild, what happens is it takes from now until when they start antler genesis, or that last trimester of growth, or they're finishing out, they really have to go find things that condition their bodies to get ready for those growth processes. With a complete pellet like our pellet, it'll condition their rumen in a matter of days to be optimizing their food intake. And you have, what, 15-acre plot here? With chufa and clover. It's a huge clover plot. Now, all the nutrition that you've built into here can be optimized. Not that clover's pretty overall thing, but the pellet now probably has more benefit overall to your deer herd because it gets them started sooner and fills all the gaps right into that primary growing season. So down south here, you probably see a summer bump. We were talking about winter stress or periodical stress. And like up north, we have winter, that's it. And we're wet and cool, so we have green and good browse all year long. Where you guys go into that late summer period where it gets dry and hot, and you have warm season grasses versus our cold season grasses. And there's another kind of nutritional gap. Right. And so you'll probably notice if you feed in the southeast that towards the end of summer that protein really starts to kick in until their bodies, again, the daylight trigger starts to happen. They really want carbohydrates. And right now I think is the best time to start feeding. Right. Because it just sets your whole year in motion. Right. And
well, here we are sitting March 7th. We literally started back in December, January, back on it, just getting the deer conditioned to it. And a lot of our food plots, we do year round, with Monster Meal. And then of course, the neat thing for us, once you get the deer conditioned to food plots and going to a certain place, we can switch some of it over to attractants, as well. It kind of educate us a little bit about attractants, when, where, and why, and how that goes with Monster Meal.
Yeah, attractants there's two. We developed our attractants. The way we developed them was the nutritional guys, the nerds back at the co-op. They're PhDs in animal nutrition. They wanted a deer hunting product that was based in nutrition. Most attractants that you have out there are just a smell, which they call a flavor, and something that deer will eat. The problem with that is that anything that's not just naturally identified as food. Right. Okay, and the best way I can explain this is, when you and I are walking down the street and we smell something cooking, we say that smells good first, and then we determine whether it's Chinese or barbecue or steak or whatever. Deer do the same thing. They have natural food triggers. So they did exhaustive testing on the ingredients that had an aroma profile that cued that, so that a deer couldn't get used to it. They would have to ignore all the other natural food cues around them in order to get used to it. And number two, the deer would gravitate towards, and number three, it had to have a reasonable nutritional benefit, because the other problem with a lot of commercial attractants is deer can overeat them, and it really messes up their digestive tract.
It's true.
But it's still an attractant. Okay, so the two ways we coach people to use it is we make a 6-pound bag, a 20-pound bag, and a 40-pound bag. The 6-pound bag is for when you're hunting in an area that really doesn't have any competition for food. Like the good example we have is when we go to our Kentucky lease, it's primarily agricultural. Right. We don't do as many food plots because it's corn and soybeans. Right. So we have our feeders to fill that in. We do have some food plots, but when we're hunting over those ag crops, when you place that attractant, again, orientation, you want a line that like you have here, so that you position the animal for a good shot angle. The other thing is crosswind. They'll pick up on that, triggers the natural food response, and they'll usually come right to it. Most of the complaints we get about my attractant not working, or any attractant not working, is usually the Chinese buffet effect that we talked about. Like when you go to a Chinese buffet, there's so many different options. Right. You have naturally what you're going to gravitate to, because you always go to, like, I'm a egg roll and fried rice guy, so I'm going to put those on my plate first. So when you add that confusing factor, attractants are really for when you're in a location that isn't going to concentrate deer activity like on a bigger field, and you want a deer to position itself in archery shot or just slow down in a certain location because you've got a narrow long plot and you want them to slow down, put the attractant out. Second use for the attractant is if you have lower quality foodstuffs, or corn is my big one, we develop that to mix with corn, because by adding the energy, fat, and protein that's in our
That
attractant,
carbohydrate to it. Yep.
and you've got the corn there,
Yep.
they're naturally going to key in on corn when corn is available and at a certain period of time. But if you mix the attractant into it, biologically they're getting more out of that corn. It also has a different aroma profile. So you can create super corn, and we did exhaustive testing. We talked about flavored corn versus regular corn versus attractant in corn. And if your neighbor's feeding corn and you blend that Monster Meal attractant with your corn, I guarantee you're going to see more activity on your feeder than your neighbor will, because they're getting more out of it. Biologically, They're getting more out of it.
We do that here. I tell you, the one thing I always talk about, Tyler, one thing that gets me was my sense of smell. We talk about that. A deer will pick up that aroma, and it does trigger them for us. Ooh, let me go see what this is. My weakness is cinnamon rolls. When I walk into a bakery and I smell a cinnamon roll, it's got me. You know, I'm ready to go buy one. And deer the same way. That sense of smell, it triggers inside of them, as you were saying. But we do, there's several times we put 3 different type attractants that mixed with Monster Meal into one thing. A lot of times we put corn, a lot of times we put attractant on one end. And it's just like going to the buffet line for us. Can't tell you how many times I've had 3 different mixtures of food in there. And from an experimental side for us, when I was really doing this farm right here, I fed all these feeders myself, and I do a third, a third, and a third, and it would tell me different times a year what they were feeding on.
Yeah.
Okay, I could see them go from here to here to here, depending on the time of year.
Yeah.
So when we did all the research on all the feeders and everything for the last 6 or 7 years, it's really intriguing to me.
Just to see what they like.
See what they like at that time of year. Yeah.
How their attitude changes from, early spring, summer, and then the fall. I mean, they just change up their habits, and it is pretty interesting to watch. We did a lot of testing that way.
Around the country, a hot topic is EHD, disease in animals and death, and in some cases, going to the buffet line. A lot of times on a feeder right here, where we just got this time of year, with the jag feeders, we got 4 inches off the ground. There's no attractants going on the ground for us. We're doing experimental stuff. We got everything documented on cameras and stuff. So in a space like this during the hunting season, we may have spaced out, some different feeders as in a buffet line. Over here you get this, over here you get that. And so I want to show Blake some of the just above ground feeders, just get it off the ground. That's something that is finished feeders right now. We're getting those made, but it complements this, everything we're doing.
And this is like, somebody asked me, a lot of people ask me, why Realtree? And I've got enough history, we've talked enough, everything like that you're really, all too often in today's kind of business model within hunting, there's a promotion model where everybody thinks it's commercial, and listen, I sell it, that's the commercial aspect of it, but we also provide it.
Yep.
But because the management mentality is growing, and that's who we're targeting with Monster Meal. We want guys that want the best for their deer herd.
Yep.
The narrative really, there's a lot of incorrect information about it. Intuitively, you want to believe something, where you guys are so diverse and you've done so much of the testing that we both learn from each other's experience. And the average person can come and attach to this PayDirt segment and learn things about what they can do on their own property. And it doesn't, you can eliminate, you don't need to have all of this, but you're going to glean specific information based on real world experience. And we're going to talk about all the things that might have effect, north, south, east, west, winter, summer, protein versus attractant versus blocks versus mineral. What are we trying to do? All that stuff. And that's why this is just, I was chomping at the bit to get down here. We've talked about why, but it really doesn't matter. We're here now, and this is going to be like a really fun project.
No, I use the word fun too. It's just neat for us to just see and track the deer 12-month process, what they do, what they start on. Because what you might do in January might be different in September. Yeah. That everything kind of rotates and changes into another season. It's right. Just, and you've hit on it already. The deer's digestive system, it tells them what they need. And so tracking it for 12 months and experimenting things here on the farm, I've enjoyed. I've just enjoyed doing it.
It's going to be a fun project, but it's something we've already done for the last few years.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like we're just now starting. This has been something we have proved out over the last couple of years since we've kind of formed this relationship. So I'm excited to see kind of where it goes from here.
And let me tell you something, you're never too old to learn. I'll use this man's words right here, and what he's telling us right now, we'll apply it to us right here. We'll experiment with and give feedback to him, our experiences about what we do. So
that's right.
Yeah, everyone here is an expert. I was talking to Roger and Wes, and you guys are the experts here. Like each property is different. We'll talk about that when we go to Rocky Branch. It's what, 10 miles away?
Yep.
Very different set of influencing factors. And that longevity and all the time that we've put into looking at this and thinking about the questions that people are going to ask because they're going to experience these things. This is going to be kind of a no BS assessment of, hey, listen, here, this isn't just what we're telling you. We're going to show you.
Right.
And to me, that's the best validation that you have. One of my mentors told me, he says, sometimes I can't hear what you say because your actions speak so loudly, right?
Yep.
And that's always stuck with me because it is what I physically can verify, what I see from credible resources is probably more influential than I hear. And that's honestly the barrier as the provider of a commercial product. There's always going to be a veil there that I sell it, okay?
Right.
But what we want to do is kind of eliminate that and let's talk about what's really going to work for you.
That's right.
And you guys are just, it's going to be a phenomenal product.
No, it's going to be fun. I tell you, the good thing too is I need education. We all need education. So anything we can learn together, it helps somebody else down the road. Well, I'm going to experiment there. So I think hopefully working with you, it's going to educate a lot of people.
Everything I speak of here is not because I'm a smart guy. It's because I've been around a lot of people in my life, you know, and I've learned so much from every person that I've touched around Monster Meal, and I thought I knew about deer nutrition before I started to work for Monster Meal.